I were speaking to myself some 40 years ago, I might say, dream big, Dave, but let God reshape those dreams with some frequency. My name is Dave Cornfield. I'm with OC International, One Challenge International, and I work with the World Evangelical Alliance as their coordinator of their Pastoring of Pastors task force. It's the passion in my heart, the calling God has given me. I like the 6-word theme, healthy pastor, healthy church, healthy city. I think the heart of reaching the city or the country or the people for God is healthy churches, and the heart of healthy churches is healthy pastors. Sometimes people ask me, what is my definition of a healthy pastor? I think at its heart, it's a pastored pastor, a person who walks in community, who walks in fellowship, who is carried, covered, discipled, mentored, doesn't live alone. That's probably expressed especially well in both the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, those relational calls to be connected to others and be alive with others. In the Pastoring of Pastors ministry, we use the acronym P.O.P with great frequency. Pastoring of pastors happens in 2 major ways, small groups and one-on-one mentoring relationships. 7 relationships that lead to excellence. The first and biggest, of course, is our relationship with our God. Secondly, relationship with ourselves. If we do not love ourselves, care for ourselves, we're not going to be much good for anybody else. And then 4 or 5 other relationships with family, with a pastoral group, with a pastoral team, a mentor, and intimate friends. There are 3 small groups that are essential for a pastor to be healthy. The first is pastoring of pastors, where he can be authentic and himself, grow, be accountable. The second is a healthy family, where his wife and kids are well cared for. And the third is a healthy pastoral team, where the team brings to life all that God wants for their church. Nobody makes pastors healthy. I'd like to go back to Genesis. God, in chapter 1, finishes 6 days saying it's good, 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 very good. And in chapter 2, before Satan shows up, before the fall, the world, the flesh, and the devil, he says it is not good. It's not good for man to be alone, and he's present when he says this. So he's not talking about a spiritual lack. He's talking about the fact that he made the perfect man to need other people. He made the perfect man with needs. That is not a factory defect. Sometimes we think if I'm really a spiritual man, I won't need anybody. And that's not true. God made us with needs. If we can't express those needs and ask for help with our needs, we will never be healthy. So summarizing, pastors need pastors. Pastors' wives need pastors' wives. In some ways, I guess I'm a great example and testimony to how desperately every one of us needs pastoring of pastors. I was ordained literally 40 years ago, and in those 40 years, I had 1.5 years when I was not under a pastoral care structure or person in some fashion. During those 1.5 years, I lost the church that I'd founded, I lost that ministry, the church self-destructed, and I went into 5 years of depression. That's a fairly expensive cost for stepping out or not having the kind of spiritual guidance and help that we each need. And so I resolved never again. So the rest of my life, I've had ups and downs. I'm a dreamer and a visionary, and that means that I'm vulnerable to depression. When my dreams crash, I go into depression. I've had 5 major depressions. But in each of them, God has brought me pastoral people who have strengthened, encouraged, nurtured, and brought me through. God has done, I think he's worked overtime in doing some major breaking in my life. When we train pastors, we say the number one thing they need to learn to do is tell bad stories about themselves. They need to learn to share where they've hurt, where they've struggled, where they've had marital conflicts, where they've had temptations. Because as we do that, other people say, oh, I could talk with him. And other pastors say that about me as I share my issues and struggles. My last major depression began in December of 2008. My daughter, Karis, came out of the hospital and went back in the next day. She's done that dozens of times. But this time something broke inside of me because I realized she's always going to be dependent on this transplant hospital in Pittsburgh. That means my wife, Debbie, will never return to Brazil. I need to leave Brazil. And that threw me into a terrific tailspin. Romans 12:2 says that the will of God is perfect and good and acceptable. I could not accept that this was acceptable. This was not pleasing. And so as I went into that depression, I really needed other people to walk with me. 3 months later, I was back in Brazil, and I'm meeting with my P.O.P team, and they do what I trained them to do. They took about an hour to listen to me, and then about an hour to do prayer ministry, ministering God's heart and mind into me. He had shown me that I had put Brazil on a pedestal, and that I had said, I can only be happy with Brazil, my team, and pastoring of pastors, and I'd made an idol out of it. What I didn't know, and as it has evolved through these following years, is God opening up Latin America and the WEA and the invitation to minister around the world in the area of pastoring of pastors. So as big as Brazil is, and as big as my ministry was, God had to break that because he had something far greater for me than what I realized. The WEA has 129 evangelical alliances around the world, and my task is to help each of them develop pastoring of pastors' arms or movements in their countries. That's a little bit like David and Goliath, or whatever you can picture as being way too big. The greatest challenge I face in the training of pastors is seeing P.O.P, or pastoring of pastors, movements begin. That's a huge challenge because it's really totally out of my hands. It's a God thing, and if God isn't doing it, it's not going to happen. On the human side, it's a matter of finding the key person who has a passion for other pastors and for seeing them be healthy, and who looks beyond his own walls of maybe his church, denomination, or city. So finding that person is incredibly challenging. Once I find him, helping him build a team so that he will be a living model of what we want to see pastors doing. So those are some of the big challenges. I hit a real turning point about 3 years ago when I realized people just loved what I was doing, and they kept inviting me back to keep doing it. And I realized, hey, I can't keep doing this. I have got to train other people to do what I do. And so since that revelation hit, which seems like such an obvious thing, but I thought if I do it well, they'll understand and they'll just reproduce it, but they didn't. So since then, I have added an extra day to every one of my ministry trips to train trainers to do whatever it was I just did. Without that intentional training day, they do not reproduce. No matter how given year, I probably average about 1 trip a month. Some months are down months, and so other months are more intensive. I try to be in the same country twice a year because I find that if I'm not, the momentum flags, and it really makes a difference if I'm personally there, personally discipling, mentoring, encouraging, challenging, training. Being there frequently is really important. Commonly, when I go into a country, the first day will be meeting with the leader and his team, and not ministering to the leader and his team. It's a tremendously hard thing to just sit there and say, leader, you lead, so I can talk to you afterwards about how you did, which is a tremendous learning experience for the leader. After that day of being with the team and observing them, we usually have a 2-day retreat or training experience of some kind. The most recent one I'll be doing now in Paraguay is Healthy Pastors Retreat. And when we finish those 2 days, we then have this additional day for training people in how to reproduce parts or all of the Healthy Pastors Retreat. Along with the Healthy Pastors Retreat, which is one of numerous tools, I love doing marriage retreats for pastors and spouses. When my wife and I do that together and then have the training day afterwards, those that are trained on that day often go with us to a different city and reproduce the whole retreat again, them being a huge part of the team. When they're done with that, they have both the confidence and the joy. This is ours. We can reproduce it, and they do. A major component of our ministry is traveling, boots on the ground, discipling, mentoring, face-to-face, engaged with people. Another major piece of it is writing. I've given some major years to writing a discipleship Bible for the Brazilian Bible Society. To most people's surprise, the Brazilian Bible Society is the largest and most powerful Bible society of the world. They serve 120 different languages. They oversee all the Spanish-speaking Bible societies of Latin America. So as this discipleship Bible is being produced, once it comes out in Portuguese, it will then be translated into Spanish, and it may get on into English. So we have 7 courses in the discipleship Bible, 1 on discipleship, 1 on relationships, 1 on restoration and inner healing, 1 on teams, 1 on marriage, 1 on character, and 1 on discipling personalities. So each of those courses has 64 small group studies. This is also a small group Bible. So it allows disciples and disciplers to really grow. As relates to pastoring of pastors, and especially thinking in this moment about materials in English, we have 3 major streams. The first major stream is pastoring of pastors. The second major stream is pastoral marriages and healthy marriages. And the third major stream is pastoral teams and how to make them work well. So we have manuals in each of those areas. I try to work in one area for 2 years, and as that really takes hold, then we're ready to move on to another area. I learned that if I move on after 1 year, people haven't actually integrated the first year and they leave it behind as we go rushing on to something else that's new and exciting and wonderful. As people ask me about languages, everything I've done began in Portuguese, moved to Spanish, now is coming into English as I work in West Africa. And because of West Africa being so strongly French, it is also moving into French. So we have those 4 major languages as POP materials and POP expression. People ask, how many pastors do I train? In some ways, that number is a very hard number to get a handle on because I train trainers and then they reproduce in circles that I don't even always hear about. And then I have books and manuals that just go all over the place, and a lot happens through those things. But a number that's really important to me is how many pastors do we actually have in pastoring of pastors groups. It's really easy to do training events. You can say I've got 16,000 or whatever that have come through such and such events, but it's an entirely different thing to say how many people have a changed lifestyle where they actually walk in pastoring of pastors lifestyle. So this last year, that number would be approximately 1,200 pastors. And this coming year, kind of finishing up 2017, we hope to see that double and then double again in 2018. I am passionate about training of pastors for both quality and quantity. Quality because we pass on our life in Christ, and quantity because as I think of 2 Timothy 2:1 and 2, I see it multiplying out to at least 4 generations. Pastoral training is vital because every pastor is the ceiling for his church's growth. If he keeps growing, the church will too.